Dobroveče. Može li Kosovo bez strane pomoći? Mogu li do pomirenja i saradnje Beograd i Priština bez pomoći međunarodne zajednice? Da li su i ako jesu, šta promenili Brexit i Trump kada je Kosovo, odnosno Zapadni Balkan u pitanju? U večerašnjem sporazumu imamo ekskluzivne goste, ambasadora Sjedinjenih američkih država u Prištini, Grega Delavija i njegovog britanskog kolegu, ambasadora Rori O'Konela. Dobrodošli, vaše ekscelencije. Želim vam dobrodošlicu i ovdje kod nas u studiju i uopšte u emisiji Sporazum.
Dobroveče.
Dobroveče. Gospodine Delavi, američka ambasada i NATO je pre par dana jasno stavio do znanja Prištini da se transformacija oružanih snaga u vojsku Kosova može izvršiti samo u okviru Ustava. Šta ukoliko vlasti u Prištini ne budu uspjele to?
Well, thank you very much. It's great to be here tonight. I can certainly say that the United States has been one of the strongest supporters of the Kosovo security forces and since Kosovo's independence almost 10 years ago. We believe very strongly in the transformation of the Kosovo security forces into a Kosovo armed forces. We feel very strongly that that transformation should happen pursuant to a constitutional amendment to the Kosovo Constitution that would enable this transformation to happen in the best possible way and taking account of the sensitivities of the various communities in Kosovo.
Šta ukoliko vlada ne bude uspjela da obezbedi dvotrećinsku većinu?
I tell you, the first thing they teach you in diplomacy school is not to answer hypothetical questions. We believe the transformation should happen in a constitutional way, and we're going to continue to work with all the officials in Kosovo to make that as likely as possible.
Hvala puno, gospodine O'Konel. Kakvo je vaše mišljenje po ovom pitanju?
Na početku, hvala za poziv. Ja bih govorio na engleski da budem što preciznije, ali slažem se 100% sa mojim američkom kolegom. I really think we're looking now in 2017, looking back in 2008, we have been supporting the development of the Kosovo security sector with our colleagues for some time. Looking at that Kosovo security force, it's really important that it works for everybody in Kosovo, from every community, and that's something that's been important to us always. And I think it has done that. And I think if we think about its time in Kosovo from 2008, since it was created, it's tried to work for all communities, it's tried to reach out to all communities. It's not been easy, it's not been perfect, but I think they've always been actually a factor of stability. They've always tried to help, and I think the fact that they've tried now in the north of Kosovo to try and do things such as the building of bridges, such as emergency rescue, is really important. It's also important that any change takes place in cooperation with NATO, in cooperation with Kosovo's partners, and in a spirit of openness and transparency and inclusion.
Hvala puno na ovom odgovoru. Sa nama večeras zapravo mladi ljudi sa Kosova, sa severa Kosova kojima želim dobrodošlicu, ali i koleginica Slađana Dobrosavljević sa radiotelevizije Herc u Štrpcu. Dobroveče i tebi, Slađana. Gledate emisiju Sporazum. Ostanite sa nama u narednih sat vremena. Pitanje za obojicu. Kako komentarišete prošlonedeljnu posetu Federike Mogherini Kosovu? Hoćete vi prvi, gospodine Delavi?
I think it was terrific to see High Rep Mogherini here. She was clearly very supportive of Kosovo. She came to Mitrovica. I saw pictures of her on the bridge, which is terrific to see that. That's a very important EU project that they've been working on with Kosovo authorities for some time. And it was very clear that she was doing her best to support Kosovo's integration in Europe, Kosovo's prospect for future with other European states, the European Union, and it was terrific to see such a senior official here supporting all the people of Kosovo, of whatever community.
Gospodine O'Konel, kada je gospodin Delavi spomenuo već most, da li smatrate da bi most na Ibru mogao da postane simbol pomirenja umjesto onoga što je bio do sada i da li je pravo vreme da to postane?
I think the bridge really should be a symbol of joining two sides together. That's a bridge, right? That's what bridges do. We all know the history of Mitrovica, and people here are living that every day. I mean, I'm lucky I don't have to deal with that reality, and it's easier for us as diplomats. But I think the visit of Mrs. Mogherini was a really strong sign that the international community is interested in the future of Kosovo and is interested in helping solving these problems. Talking about the bridge, one ends up talking about the wall as well. And I think it was really positive, the role that the mayor of North Mitrovica played with the Kosovo institutions to find a peaceful solution. I really believe that that's possible, always, but people need to work hard and have goodwill. We got through one process. I'm sure there'll be other problems in the future, but I'm sure with goodwill they can get solved as well.
Ovako, opet za vas pitanje, gospodine Delavi, nedavno je održana sednica Savjeta bezbednosti na kojoj je predstavljen izveštaj novog generalnog sekretara o Kosovu i u izveštaju se konstatuje, ja ću morati da citiram, posvećenost Beograda i Prištine napredovanju dijaloga slabija, gubitak zamajca povećava opasnost da u procesu normalizacije dođe do zastoja. Da li vi osjećate da briselski dijalog slabi ili ne?
It's very important for both sides to take positive steps to improve the lives of all the people of whatever community in Kosovo. And the Brussels dialogue is the best way to get from here to tomorrow. There's been a lot of progress in the dialogue over the last couple of years, certainly here in Mitrovica. You see the police are integrated. We see that the civil registry offices are just starting to issue documents in Mitrovica North. We have seen the bridge project, which Ambassador O'Konel just talked about. So I think there are a lot of real results from the dialogue. Certainly there are some days in the dialogue that are better than others, but the dialogue is the path for Kosovo, for all of Kosovo, to become closer to European institutions. And I think both sides need to keep working to make that more possible.
Gospodine O'Konel, rekli ste malo čas da moramo da spomenemo i zid pored mosta. Ne bi nekako preskočila ni voz koji je također jedan od događaja u poslednje vreme. Vrlo često se čuje sa zapada da se negde smiri ta zapaljiva retorika s obe strane i u Beogradu i Prištini. Koliko su te reči od strane čelnika i Beograda i Prištine zapaljive i koliko su one udaljile sam proces dijaloga?
We're talking about rhetoric. Politicians respond to what people want. That's how democracy should work. And if people want rhetoric like that, they'll vote for those politicians. If they don't like the rhetoric, they can vote for somebody else. Unfortunately, I mean, it's not just Kosovo, it's the whole Balkans. There's a long history of people using rhetoric to win votes. It's easier sometimes to punt the other side than it is to do things for your own people. I mean, and that's just not the Balkans. I mean, that's the world. That's human nature. The only way that changes is if citizens say they've had enough of it. And then politicians will respond. You know, once people start to say that, then they'll have enough. Now, what's really positive, I think, is that we solved the wall problem. The European Union helped, but the leaders locally helped to solve that. The train, I don't think it was a very good idea. And I've spoken to people in Mitrovica who don't think it was a very good idea. And I hope we don't get more of these things in the future. But I'm sure that we will, because history's shown us that we will. And I think the most important lesson is that politicians will react how they think their voters want them to react. And if people say, we don't want rhetoric like this, we don't want this kind of behaviour, then the politicians will start to listen.
Da, svakako ljudi tako kažu, ali i upozorenja stižu konkretno iz Njujorka, poručuju liderima da spuste, reći ću, loptu i da nekako promene vokabular kojim se obraćaju. Koliko i sam Zahir Tanin je upozorio da zbog svih dešavanja koje smo spomenuli da će biti potrebno vremena da se dijalogi i pregovori vrate na kolosek, pravi kolosek naravno. Koliko su zapravo bile sve one priče koje su spominjane? Nažalost, spominjalo se i da je sve na ivici sukoba, da je sve moguće. Koliko je zapravo sve to moguće i kakvo je vaše mišljenje po tom pitanju?
Well, there's been some unhelpful rhetoric, unfortunately, on both sides. I think the people that live in Mitrovica, no matter which side of the Ibar they're on, really don't want rhetoric. I think they want solutions to real problems that they face. They want their lives to be better. They want their children to be able to go to good schools. They want the water to come on when they turn the tap, and they want the lights to come on. You know, there was a terrific article in Kosovo 2.0 just a couple of weeks ago that talked with people in Mitrovica and kind of came to this exact conclusion. The people who live here, many of them have had enough rhetoric, they've had enough tension, they just want to get on with their lives.
Čini mi se da je Evropska unija u ovim situacijama brzo reagovala. Federica Mogherini je vrlo brzo sazvala sastanak sa šefovima i iz Beograda i iz Prištine i negde oni su obećali da će biti dobri i da će spustiti tenzije. Da li vam se čini možda da Evropska unija treba da preuzme tu neku jaču posredničku ulogu u ovim pregovorima ili ne?
I think it was really good that the High Representative reacted and brought the leaders together. I think there are two things that I think. I totally agree with Ambassador Delavi that what we hear from leaders and what we hear from everyone else living in the countries can be two different things. But the only person who can join us up together are the people who live in Kosovo and demanding something different from their leaders. Look, both sides have now reduced that rhetoric. There's a little bit less of it, but not totally. And as we get closer to elections, whether in Serbia or in Kosovo, we can expect more of that rhetoric. I think it's really important to avoid it, to stop getting ourselves into situations that are hard to solve. But I also think that we need to think about long-term solutions. We can spend, and we spend a lot of our days worrying about the latest crisis. And we spend so much energy about how someone has painted a train. And that doesn't give anyone a job. That doesn't give everyone hope for the future. It doesn't give anyone an education. It certainly doesn't help, and let's be honest about this, Serbs and Albanians find a way of living together more easily. Because of all the history, that is difficult, and I understand it. So what I hope is that maybe we can spend a little bit less of our time managing crises and a little bit more thinking about what kind of future do people want to see together. And really start from that point. Do we want a future where people in the north of Mitrovica do not feel safe to go to the south and people in the south don't feel safe to come to the north? I don't think anyone really wants that. So let's find a way of making a different future.
I govorimo sada ovde o tenzijama i o retorici Beograda i Prištine. Skupština Kosova donela odluku da zatraži od vlade obustavu briselskog dijaloga do potpunog oslobađanja Ramuša Haradinaja. Kako vi na to gledate, gospodine Delavi?
I think it's very important to continue the dialogue. The dialogue between Kosovo and Serbia is the path, certainly for Kosovo, to approach Europe. It is in the interest of Kosovo's citizens. It is, of course, in the interest of Serbia's citizens as well. And I think any detour from the path to the dialogue would, picking off on what Ambassador O'Konel said, would not make people's lives better, would make rhetoric worse, and would head us in the wrong direction.
Kako vi komentarišete ovaj posljednji događaj?
Exactly. I mean, I'd agree exactly with my US colleague that there's only the way of solving these problems is dialogue. I mean, it seems obvious when you say it like that. What's the other alternative? War? Conflict? It's silly. Of course we have to solve these problems with dialogue. It's the best way of doing them. It's the only way of doing them. And there are two things I'd say. I agree, Greg's already said what I would say on the dialogue. You asked about the Haradinaj trial. And this is sensitive. And we just need to understand how sensitive these things are. And they're sensitive because we're not really talking about the past in an open way. There are some conversations, but where has there really been a conversation about what happened in Kosovo in the past? People remember what the other side did to them. And that's normal, that's human nature. I mean, I'm Irish, I understand those conversations because we've had similar conversations like that in Northern Ireland. So you get this situation where if an arrest warrant comes out for somebody, everyone interprets it either as a hero being arrested or as a good step against a war criminal. It doesn't matter who it is. And that can't be positive. You know, my sense is that anyone who's committed crimes, and there were some awful crimes committed in Kosovo, should be tried. But there needs to be a process of now discussing and telling the truth about what happened. You know, the Haradinaj case is interesting and people have reacted so badly to it because there's a perfectly legitimate question that if there's all this evidence out there against him, why wasn't that given to the EU or to the UN or to The Hague? I mean, it sounds a bit funny, right? There's another question. There are lots of people who've been accused of war crimes who are now living in central Serbia who are not being tried. And I'd say, they need to have a process as well. Equally, though, there needs to be a conversation in Kosovo about what happened, about, let's say we're talking about missing persons. There are still 1,600 missing persons from the conflict, 400 of them are Serbs. But when you listen to the conversation in Kosovo, you don't hear about those 400 Serbs, about 100 from neither Serbian or Albanian communities. So we get to the point where the dialogue gets threatened, which would be really bad, because of an arrest warrant. That's why we have to have a conversation, I think, really quite soon, about the truth, about what happened in the past in Kosovo.
Gospodine Delavi, u Njujorku, gde je i sedište Ujedinjenih nacija, 4 puta godišnje se podnosi izveštaj Savetu bezbednosti koji se malo čas spomenula o stanju na Kosovu, čiji je status određen rezolucijom 1244. Kako Amerika gleda na taj dokument?
The United States has recognized the independence of Kosovo since 2008. We support Kosovo's membership in the United Nations and, in fact, all international organizations to which it desires to belong. And we certainly support the efforts of Kosovo to achieve recognitions from other countries of the world.
Hvala puno na odgovoru, gospodine O'Konel. Da, svakako jeste istina ovo što je gospodin Delavi rekao, ali velike zemlje nisu priznale nezavisnost Kosova, kao što su Kina, Indija, Rusija i 5 zemalja Evropske unije. I nema nekih nagoveštaja da će se to uskoro dogoditi. Kako vi ocenjujete status Kosova na međunarodnom planu?
Look, 10 years ago here, well, not literally here, but in North Mitrovica, someone asked me in a conference when I was a young diplomat, can Kosovo become independent? And they wanted to hear, the foreigner say, we're going to talk about the final status when standards have been implemented. Okay, that was the line. And I said, yes, it could become independent. And everyone in the room took a deep breath in and went, but this is terrible. How can someone mention the independence word? Well, because it was possible and it happened. And I think, sometimes we need to be a bit more open about things when we disagree. As Greg said, both of our countries have recognised Kosovo, and we did that because, frankly, that was the pathway that we got put onto from the start of the 1990s, when the crackdown happened, when Slovenia refused to send its police here, and everything that came afterwards was linked to that decision by Mr. Milosevic, and that's where we are. I'm not saying it was inevitable, but it was the most likely outcome. We've got a situation where Kosovo isn't in the United Nations, but let's not forget, Resolution 1244 talks about a United Nations process to determine the final status of Kosovo. There was a United Nations process to determine the status of Kosovo, UNISEC. that took a year and a half to do its work and basically came up with a solution which was, I think, the only thing on the table. A worse result would have been, okay, the UN is going to walk away from this, and what happens when people walk away from a peace process is that war starts again. So we got a solution that not everyone supported, and we understand that, but was probably the only way that there was going to be a peaceful outcome here. Now, looking forward 7 years, there is still a lively, thriving Serbian community in Kosovo, and that is really important and has always been important for our governments, and it's why we've done whatever we can to protect that. Now, there is a contested statehood because some countries don't recognise it. We do, and we think Kosovo's place should be in the UN, and that would be a positive thing. But it's part of that telling the truth, I think, that we need to do. What's the alternative here, really? There isn't one. But what we need to do now is do whatever we can to make that work for everyone.
Gospodine Delavi, šta očekujete od novog pokušaja koji je Priština najavila za prijem Kosova u UNESCO?
Well, we were disappointed that Kosovo barely missed the two-thirds supermajority required to get into UNESCO in the, I guess, November of 2015. We certainly support Kosovo's membership in UNESCO, as we support Kosovo's membership in other organizations, whether United Nations or not, that it desires to become part of. There is, I'm not sure what's going to happen next time this is on the table. I think that's in the fall of 2017. But we certainly support Kosovo's membership in UNESCO.
Dobro, čime je Kosovo zaslužilo da postane član UNESCO?
Kosovo is a country with, first of all, it's an independent country that we recognize and we believe other countries should recognize too. It is a country with rich cultural heritage that derived from the various civilizations that have lived here over the millennia. I think Kosovo can continue to make its best possible case for UNESCO membership by, for example, respecting the Ahtisaari Plan Article 5, which in particular deals with cultural heritage assets that belong to the Serbian Orthodox Church. But I think Kosovo is making a lot of progress, and it will continue to do so.
Čuli smo mišljenje gospodine Delavije, gospodine O'Konel, da li se vi slažete da Kosovo zaslužuje i čime je zaslužilo zapravo da postane član UNESCO i ko bi trebalo da brine o srpskoj kulturnoj baštini na Kosovu?
That's a really good question. Naročito slažem se sa ambasadorom, but the two things here. One, look, Kosovo's got the right to be a member. It's an independent country, and that's the sort of simple basis of this. Why didn't it work last time? Well, speaking honestly, people had doubts about Kosovo's seriousness about protecting cultural heritage. A lot of that, again, speaking seriously, came because there was a very strong campaign from the Serbian government to show that Kosovo was abusing cultural heritage. Let's just break this down a bit. In 2004, there was a horrendous set of events over 3 days that targeted mostly, not entirely, but mostly the Serbian community. And that has left a lot of suspicion and a lot of doubt, and I understand that. It was awful. We condemned it at the time. We continue to condemn it. What happened afterwards? Well, these are not things that are talked about a lot, but the major donor for the reparation and the rebuilding of the structures and the churches was the Kosovo government. So they have tried to demonstrate that they're committed to the protection. Who protects those sites around Kosovo now? There's one site of cultural heritage which is protected by KFOR, but the majority of those sites is protected by the Kosovo police. And they're protected, they live within Kosovo, they're protected in Kosovo. Now, could more be done? Probably, and so UNESCO membership would help, because Kosovo would then be judged internationally on how well it's doing. Actually, when they had this, they launched a silly draft law, and it was a very bad draft law a year and a half ago, and that made people doubt how serious they were. The law wouldn't have passed, and it was a really unintelligent thing to do when they were applying to UNESCO. But I live in Pristina. Do I think most people think every day about cultural heritage in Kosovo? Not really. Do I think that if you asked the majority, not everybody, but the majority, are they proud of the UNESCO sites that are in Kosovo, that are built, you know, a lot of them essentially as part of the Serbian heritage in Kosovo? Yes, I think a majority would be. Not everyone, and that means that there's some protection to be done, but actually I think there's a good foundation for cooperation there. It's a question of whether people want to use it.
Također jako aktualna tema na Kosovu jeste zajednica srpskih opština i na nedavnoj sednici Saveta bezbednosti generalni sekretar Antonio Guterres je ukazao i na to da još nije postignut jasan napredak ni kada je reč o uspostavljanju zajednice srpskih opština, što, kako navodi, je ključan aspekt sporazuma postignutog u okviru dijaloga pod posredovanjem Evropske unije. Da li neko od stranih diplomata može da utiče na to na Kosovo ili ne? Evo recimo vi, da li možete vi da utičete na ovo pitanje?
Related to the Association of Serb Majority Municipalities. We are in constant dialogue, small d dialogue, with the Kosovo government, the Kosovo Serb representatives, other governments related to the Association of Serb Majority Municipalities. We believe it's very important for the future of the minority communities in Kosovo. It would be very important for integrating, for example, education and health issues under the Kosovo umbrella to make sure that people have these essential services in their own languages. I think it's very important to point out that this association would be formed in compliance with Kosovo's laws, Kosovo's constitutions, and would reinforce Kosovo's sovereignty. I've been very pleased with the government of Kosovo announcements for over the last several weeks. They seem to be making progress on moving towards a compromise with the Kosovo Serb representatives, and I'd certainly call on the representatives, the elected and appointed representatives from the Kosovo Serb community, to reach out to them and to begin the most essential step, which is the drafting of the association statute.
Gospodin O'Konel, kakvo je vaše mišljenje po ovom pitanju?
We are, as always,
delite mišljenje.
Always lined up with the Americans. But look, I think there are two things I just build on. I agree absolutely with what Greg's saying. I mean, there are two things. It's everyone who's got to implement this thing. If I was sitting in a Serbian community in Kosovo, I'd hear Pristina saying one thing and Belgrade saying the other, and I wouldn't know what to think. But your Kosovo Serb representatives are the representatives of the Serbian community here, and if you want them to press for this, you've got to tell them to press for this. I know them all, I like them, I've spent many a fun time with them, but I really think they should be in the institutions doing their jobs. I think some of them want to, but they can't influence. And you asked about diplomats' influence. We try and influence these things, but elected representatives who are responsible to the people, they're the ones who should be influencing it. And to do that, they've got to be in the institutions. They can't influence from outside. So that's the first thing. The second thing, I think the association will help. It will give people a psychological boost about their status in Kosovo. But all those things, healthcare, education, use of the Serbian language, those are people's rights. They aren't something that should be negotiated. People have got the right for that right now. And if it's not happening, then people should be asking their representatives to complain about it. The Serbian language is part of Kosovo's cultural heritage. And that's it. And there's no debate about that. So I think these rights of people are things that people should enjoy no matter what, even if the implementation of this association is taking a very long time.
Kako vidite srpsku zajednicu, to je zajednicu srpskih opština? Mnogi spominju da bi to bila svojevrsna, ajde nazovimo to tako, nevladina organizacija. Koja ovlašćenja vi vidite kada je zajednica srpskih opština u pitanju?
I think that's spelled out pretty well in the Brussels agreements, the one from 2013 and the longer agreement from 2015, which spells out exactly what the association would look like.
Šta?
I'm sorry?
Šta se navodi tačno? Da li možete da kažete gledalcima šta je tačno navedeno? Kako bi trebalo da izgleda zajednica srpskih opština? Šta je dogovoreno u Briselu?
Well, thank you for that tough question. I've read the agreement many times. I've not memorized it. So, but it is available online, and everyone can see exactly what it said. So, on the European Union website. So, I think it is intended to be an institution that will make it easier for the Serb majority communities of Kosovo to work together on issues of common interest. Things like education, things like healthcare, things like use of the Serbian language, as my colleague has pointed out. So, it is something that is important to the Serb language community and the Kosovo Serbs. We think it's spelled out in the Ahtisaari plan in a not very detailed way, and that was elaborated in 2013 and then again in 2015. It's something that Kosovo needs to do for its own citizens. I think that's the key here. This is for Kosovo citizens. And unfortunately, I think there's too much rhetoric about it being for citizens of a foreign state. It's not. It's for Kosovo citizens. It will make their lives better and make it easier for them to operate in Kosovo and to use their own language for the most critical governmental services.
Hvala puno. Gospodin O'Konel, kako vi vidite zajednicu srpskih opština onda kada bude osnovana, naravno?
Yeah, what Ambassador Delavi said. Of course I do. I mean, look, I'm going to take another thing though. So Greg mentioned languages, and you weren't going to ask me about this, but I'm going to answer the question anyway, even though there's no question there. Okay, look, Serbian should be used in Kosovo, and people should have right access to government institutions and healthcare and education in Serbian. I absolutely agree with that. Okay, I was at a play a year and a half ago, Romeo and Juliet, wonderful Shakespeare play, 800th anniversary of Shakespeare's death last year. So it was done in Albanian and Serbian. It was an extraordinary thing. And I say young woman sitting next to me and my wife, she was probably about 29, but that's young for me. She asked us, when the people were speaking in Serbian, do you understand? And it just struck me that we'd all assumed that the average Albanian in Kosovo would speak Serbian, because everyone grew up in Yugoslavia and they spoke Serbian. And suddenly a whole generation has grown up from the 1990s who don't speak Serbian. The average Serb in Kosovo, there's a certain generation who spoke Albanian, but didn't really speak Albanian that much, the average person. And certainly young people have been living separate lives. What happens now if an 18-year-old Serb and an 18-year-old Albanian meet? If they can speak English, they speak in English. I think that's a terribly sad thing for two communities who are going to, no matter what happens, are going to be living next to each other, don't have that, and when I mean next to each other, really next to each other in the same town, not just a few cities away, don't speak each other's language. It's a little bit about trying to rebuild those links in the past. And we talk about, I think about Trepča in Mitrovica. It used to be something that brought communities together, and for too long it's been something that separate communities. So when we're thinking about the association, I think it's really important because it will give people just a sense of belonging and a sense that they're citizens of Kosovo. But at the same time, we need to think about those things that are going to be for everybody. Not the Serbian municipalities and the other municipalities, but what is it for everyone? What are those places where people can meet? How do those places where people really integrate?
I kada govorimo već o zajednici srpskih opština, vi ste spomenuli da su predstavnici srpske zajednice, odnosno predstavnici srpske liste zamrzli svoje funkcije u radu kosovskih institucija, iako su oni i dalje članovi vladajuće, to jest članovi koalicije koja je trenutno na vlasti na Kosovu. I mi smo pitali gospodina Branimira Stojanovića, inače je zamjenika premijera Kosova, ko i kako treba da formira zajednicu srpskih opština. Pa evo da poslušamo njegovu izjavu.
Zajednica srpskih opština nije dogovorana u nekim selima, na nekim sastancima, niti po nekim kancelarijama ili po kafanama. bez ikakvog smisla i dogovora, da se ne zna ko je to dogovarao i kako je dogovarao, već je to dogovoreno na najvišem političkom nivou u Briselu. I vrlo jasno postoji nacrtan put kojim treba da se krećemo dok dođemo do tog konačnog rješenja, do zajednice, do tog rezultata za koji još uvijek ne znamo kako će potpuno izgledati, ali znamo koji je put kojim treba da pređemo i koje su usputne stanice na koje moramo stati, odnosno koje su to odluke koje će se donositi na tom putu. Najveći je problem oko toga što očigledno ne postoji saglasje da li ćemo sprovoditi ono što je dogovoreno ili ćemo sprovoditi nešto novo. Neki u Prištini bi očigledno želeli da sprovodimo nešto drugo, ne ono što je dogovoreno, da ne prođemo tim putem koji smo zajedno, koji je nacrtan u Briselu, već da sada se nekom improvizacijom, izmišljanjem nekih novih stanica, nekih novih odluka, obesmisli taj put i u konačnici dobijemo neki drugačiji rezultat od onog koji je nama potreban i koji je suštinski važan za ovaj narod ovde. Mi se držimo onoga što je dogovoreno u Briselu. Vrlo jasno kaže plan implementacije, koji su koraci i da svakako zajednica ne može da bude formirana bez Srba na Kosovu i Metohiji, a svi oni koji bi to želeli da rade, bave se, što naš narod kaže, prave račun bez krčmara, odnosno rade posao koji im nije dat. Mi ćemo voditi računa i tekako da sve što je dogovoreno u Briselu bude dosledno sprovedeno i ukoliko bude bilo u narednom periodu izmena tog osnovnog puta koji je nacrtan, to ne može da se desi bez saglasja Beograda i niko ne može da isključi Beograd iz procesa implementacije kao što ne može da isključi ni Srbe sa Kosova.
Gospodo, čuli ste izjavu zamjenika premijera, gospodina Stojanovića. Gospodine Delavi, da li imate komentar na ovo?
Well, I think it's very important for both sides to start working on this now. And I think people have come a long way. I'm afraid there's a little too much commentary right now about where's the meeting going to take place. Is it going to be here? Is it going to be Brussels? Is it going to be in somewhere else? And I think the essentials are agreed. The essentials are spelled out in the two Brussels agreements. The Kosovo Constitutional Court has ruled on the association principles from the Brussels Agreement, and it's really time for people to start working on the statute, which is the core output of the agreement. And you know, I hate to see people arguing about things like the shape of the table when they could just be solving problems.
Hvala puno, gospodine O'Konel.
Well, it's really, yeah, I have a philosophy degree, so I like pointless arguments. But it's now, you know, we're talking about things, I mean, okay, is there going to be an association or isn't there going to be an association? That's a big question. Is it going to be launched in Pristina or in Brussels, and in what order and at what time of the day, and what colour trousers will each participant wear? I mean, how many jobs is that going to create? I mean, how many hospitals is that argument going to build? I mean, nothing. So, you know, look, I like Bana Stojanovic. I think he's full of energy, and I think he's got good ideas. But it's really interesting when he says, you know, it can't be implemented without the Serbs. Well, of course it can't be implemented without the Serbs. That's why people need to get on with the job, come back into the institutions, start writing down on paper what this thing is going to do, and just get on with it.
Hvala puno na odgovoru. A sad idemo do Slađane koja će nam predstaviti rezultat jednog zanimljivog istraživanja vezanog upravo za zajednicu srpskih opština. Slađana, izvoli.
Hvala, Marija. Nevladina organizacija Aktiv je u maju prošle godine sprovela istraživanje analiza trendova stavovi građana na severu Kosova. Evo šta očekuju od zajednice srpskih opština. Na skali od 1 do 5 stav da će zajednica srpskih opština doprineti poboljšanju položaja Srba ocenili su sa 2,9, a da će ona doprineti integraciji Srba u pravno-politički sistem Kosova 2,8. Stav da će zajednica srpskih opština omogućiti ekonomski razvoj i zapošljavanje građani na severu Kosova ocenili su sa 2,7. A sada bih želela vas da pitam, da li verujete da će zajednica srpskih opština biti formirana u ovoj godini? Zeleni karton znači da, crveni ne. Izvolite, glasajte. Vidjeli smo kako ste glasali. Imamo 18 crvenih kartona i 2 zelena, što znači da velika većina vas smatra da zajednica srpskih opština neće biti formirana u ovoj godini. Zašto tako mislite?
Dobro večer. Ja sam odgovorila da i to baziram na određenim istraživanjima koje sam sama radila i na činjenici da od prošlog decembra možemo često da čujemo kako američke zvaničnike, tako i zvaničnike Evropskog parlamenta koji govore da je došlo napokon vreme za osnivanje zajednice i zato mislim da ćemo je verovatno vidjeti u toku ove godine, posebno ako bude bilo preliminarnih izbora, ali isto tako apsolutno razumem odgovor većine u publici, jer smatram da upravo i ovo što je Marija pomenula, rezoluciju današnju i čitava zatezanja koja smo vidjeli u zadnje vreme, jednostavno pokazuje jednu negativnu tendenciju kosovske vlade da pokuša da bilo utiče na pravosudne procese u okolini ili da generalno pritiska srpsku zajednicu da prihvati neke stvari koje im nisu odgovarajući. Tako da verujem da iako dođe do osnivanja zajednice, upravo zato ljudi smatraju da možda i neće, jer će ona biti ono što ne treba Srbima, to jest neće odgovoriti na prave potrebe srpske zajednice, jer ovo ovde su građani i za razliku od gosta koje zaista uvažavam, oni nisu diplomate i ne gledaju Kosovo kroz ružičaste naočare i plašim se da svi razumeju da zajednica koju ćemo dobiti, ako je dobijemo, će zapravo značiti lagano tihu migraciju srpske zajednice sa Kosova nego bilo kakvo rešenje naših problema.
Marija, čuli ste šta kažu mladi Srbi sa severa Kosova. Eventualno neki vaš komentar.
Hvala puno, Slađana. Hvala i ovim mladim ljudima, posebno gospođici koja je obrazložila svoj stav. I ja verujem da vi imate komentar na sve ovo. Kao što reče ova dama, ovo su uglavnom, ne uglavnom, nego ovo jesu Srbi sa severa Kosova. I da li vas iznenađuje to što ljudi ne očekuju da zajednica bude formirana do kraja godine i uopšte taj stav koji imaju?
Well, I have to say that you should not go into diplomacy unless you're prepared to be an optimist all the time. And because the idea that you could change the world using only your words.
Na ružičaste naočare.
Yeah. It's, so I'm going to be a little more optimistic than the audience, and I'm going to say that the association is going to be established this year, and it is going to make a positive difference in people's lives, because that's what I believe and that's what I'm working for.
Yeah, my sense is that if a government says it's going to do something, it should do that thing. That's how people believe in democracy. The Kosovo government said it's going to implement it, it should implement it. I actually think that they're ready to move ahead now. I really think they are. I think the Serbian representatives need to get on with it, and so I think the Kosovo government is there. But it's really interesting to hear, I wouldn't call it cynicism about the association. People don't think necessarily it's going to solve their problems. Okay, 60% may think they'll improve it. I think it's psychologically important. If the Kosovo government says, yes, we're doing this, it means that they're giving something that the Serbian community wants and probably the Albanian community doesn't want. You know, no one gets out of bed in Pristina or Roševac and says, yes, I want to go and help form the association. So if they do it, it'll be a good sign that they're doing something for the Serbian community. But if people want jobs and they want education, it's going to need more than this. It's going to need some kind of integration. And I think there are good ideas there, but people need to think, you know, let's have realistic expectations. But I think it would be a very, very positive sign of that commitment.
If I could take the opportunity to say how much I agree with my British colleague. Okay, good, thank you. And I think this, the kind of relationship between the government and the people has to work both ways. And it's very important for the people in Mitrovica and the rest of Kosovo to see their representatives actually working for them in the government. There are several political parties in Kosovo now that are boycotting the assembly. The Kosovo Serb members of government are boycotting the government or freezing the government right now. And I don't think that helps the citizens of Kosovo, whatever community, get anything done. If their representatives aren't working for them in Pristina, then it's hard to see their lives getting better.
Hvala puno na ovom odgovoru. Inače, zajednica, to jest formiranje zajednice srpskih opština je, kao što ste i sami večeras rekli, deo briselskog sporazuma, odnosno dogovora u Briselu. I poštovanje upravo toga što je dogovoreno u Briselu je, da kažem, preduslov za evropsku integraciju i Beograda i Prištine. Prethodna američka administracija bila je, moglo bi se reći, strateški partner Evropske unije i snažno podržavala evropski put Kosova. Da li se nešto menja dolaskom novog predsjednika Sjedinjenih Američkih Država? Da li se nešto promenilo i hoće li se promeniti?
The United States continues to support Kosovo. I say this a lot, which is one thing, but our ambassador to the United Nations, Nikki Haley, said a couple of days ago that Kosovo deserves a seat at the UN table, just like any other state. More broadly, our Vice President Pence was in Munich for the Munich Security Conference a couple of weeks ago and talked about the U.S. Commitment to NATO and to partnership with Europe. So I am very confident that our partnership with Kosovo and with Europe will continue to be broad and deep.
Gospodine O'Konel, da li posle Brexita, moram da vam postavim to pitanje, da li Kosovo treba da nastavi svoj evropski put i da li se odnos Velike Britanije, stav Velike Britanije prema Kosovu menja posle Brexita ili ne?
If anything, our engagement in the Balkans has got more. And you've heard what my Foreign Secretary said, including when he came to visit Kosovo in November, that we are still part of Europe. I'll be leaving the European Union, but we're still going to be part of Europe. And we're interested in making sure that this is a Europe whole, free and at peace, in Churchill's words. And so we're going to be remaining committed. What we've said is that all the countries of Europe who see their future in the European Union will get our support, certainly whilst we're a member, but also in conducting the reforms that they see as necessary. And I think in the Balkans it's particularly important. You know, the logic of the European Union has always been that borders become less important, that peoples become more integrated. I think that's particularly important when where the communities run across borders, like they do in the Balkans. I think it's been positive, made a huge positive commitment and contribution to European peace. And so, if Kosovo is going in that direction, we'll be there to help, absolutely.
Hvala puno. I negdje govorimo o briselskom dijalogu, dobar deo ove emisije. Negdje je to i jako aktualna tema kada su u pitanju odnosi Beograda i Prištine, pa ne možemo da izbjegnemo te teme. Da ja moram da vas pitam, da li na kraju briselskog dijaloga stoji ono pitanje nad pitanjima? Znači, da li će Beograd morati da prizna Kosovo ukoliko želi punopravno članstvo u Evropskoj uniji?
You should not ask an American about what the EU is going to require of any country.
Vaše mišljenje, ja vas pitam za vaše mišljenje.
Diplomats rarely have personal opinions about political issues. I would like to tag on, though, to something else that you mentioned a minute ago about Kosovo's progress towards Europe. And I think it would be wonderful if someone could just wave a magic wand and then Kosovo would be just like Belgium. That's not going to happen. There's hard work involved, there's compromise involved, and there's internal work of all Kosovo's communities, Kosovo's government, and Kosovo's citizens have to support the government. You know, unfortunately, the magic wand doesn't exist. People are going to have to work, they're going to have to make compromises. That's certainly going to be the interest of Kosovo. That it become more integrated with Europe, and it's certainly in the interest of Kosovo's neighbors as well.
Let me add something to that. You know what our governments think. You know, we recognised Kosovo straight after it declared independence. I mean, there's no secret about that. it doesn't mean that we don't have good relations with everyone in the region. Actually, this year we're celebrating 180 years of diplomatic relations with Serbia. And Britain was one of the first countries to establish diplomatic relations with Serbia. I always like bringing Serbian visitors into the British Foreign Ministry because outside the Foreign Secretary's office, there's a mural. It's huge. It's about 15 meters by 8 meters tall. And it's of Britanije, the peacemaker, depicted as a woman with a sword, shielding Serbia, depicted as a young girl who's carrying a baby in her arms. That's Montenegro. And it's the history of the First World War. Our relations are long and deep with many of the countries of the Western Balkans. When it comes to, you ask the question about independence, when it gets down to it, there's a sort of a yes-no answer. And it's hard to get around that question. And we've both recognised Kosovo, and you know what we think about this. But the one thing I would say is, I talked about the past a bit earlier, and you often hear people say, we can't start talking to each other, we can't start talking about the past, we can't start reconciling until every political issue is resolved. Whereas actually I think that's a shame. I think there is a generation growing up in the Balkans who's not talking to people from different countries and different communities because they're waiting for all of these political issues to be resolved. Well, that's going to be a wasted life. But the other thing is that these issues are going to be easier to resolve if people are talking to each other. So, yes, the question always comes back to independence or not. But I think almost a more interesting question is, how do you talk to your neighbour down the road, in the next village, in the next city? How does that happen? Whether or not we're talking about the politics, how do those human relationships get built? And I think that's harder, but I think that's something that every person can do. Even if they don't have control over the politics, they do have control over their own communities.
Hvala puno. Gospodine Delavi, kako ocenjujete napore kosovske vlasti da ispune svoje obaveze nakon potpisivanja sporazuma o pridruživanju i saradnji s Evropskom unijom? Da li im ide od ruke?
Well, once again, the SAA is an EU thing and I'm an American, so I'm not in charge of it. My friend, Ambassador Postelova, might take offense if I talk too much about it. But I certainly can say how important the SAA is to Kosovo's future as a part of integrating with Europe. I used to serve in Zagreb, Croatia, about 10 years ago when it was working on its SAA with the European Union. It, of course, succeeded and is now a member of the EU. There's a lot of steps in completing the SAA. And a lot of them require public support of one kind or another. I would love to see more discussion in Kosovo about the SAA, what its requirements are, because the government is going to have to persuade the people that they have to do certain things in order to implement the SAA. Unfortunately, there is less talk about that than I would like. It's not straightforward. It takes many years to complete all the steps. And the sooner that is started energetically, the better it will be for Kosovo, and the closer Kosovo will come to its destiny in Europe.
Gospodin O'Konel, da li vi smatrate da li se slažete sa kolegom?
This has been one of those brilliant exams where you sit next to the cleverest kid in class and you can copy all of his answers. I think it also shows that the international community is pretty much united in its approach to Kosovo, and it has been for some time. That the European Union, joining the European Union, is a really technical process, and it requires a lot of hard work. At the moment, I'm slightly worried that the Kosovo Assembly spends its time making declarations and not passing laws. And actually, all these institutions need to make real progress in doing the technical work, moving forward. And it is a long and a difficult but a really worthwhile process, but it needs a little bit more energy into it now.
Hvala vam puno. Idemo da vidimo i šta o tome koliko je Kosovo odmaklo na ispunjenju obaveza na osnovu sporazuma o pridruživanju i saradnji misli ministarka za evropske integracije Mimoza Ahmetej.
Kosova gjeografikisht është pjesë e Evropës, Populata e saj, rinia e saj është pjesë përbërëse e Evropës, është ambicje e qeverisë tonë dhe gjitha institucioneve që Kosovën ta bëjnë po ashtu edhe pjesë të Bashkimit Evropian. Në këtë rrugë që ne jemi të vendosur ta vazhdojmë, Kosova ka arrit ta nënshkruajë marrëveshjen e parë për stabilizim dhe asocim me Bashkimin Evropian. Kosova i ka krijuar, është në proces të krijimit të mekanizmave obligativ të cilët dalin nga marrëveshja e stabilizimit dhe asociimit. Sigurisht, kjo do të kërkon punë, angazhim të madh të gjithë shoqërisë kosovare, institucioneve dhe popullatës, dhe reforma që ne duhet t'i ndërmarrim nuk do t'jenë më të letat, por ne jemi të përkushtuar që pavarësisht të gjithave të jemi sa më herët sa më parë që është e mundur pjesë e Bashkimit Evropian. Nëse ne kemi arrit që të rriton si këngëtarë, si Rita Ora, apo si Dua Lipa, si sportistja Majlinda Kelmendi ta bëjnë Kosovën të njohur jo vetëm në Evropë, por në gjithë botën, atëherë unë nuk e shoh pengesë dhe problem që një ditë në një të ardhme të afërt Kosova të jetë po ashtu pjesë edhe de jure e Bashkimit Evropian.
Eto, čuli smo šta kaže kosovska ministarka po ovom pitanju, a sada idemo do Slađe. Slađo, šta kažu građani severa na ulazak Kosova u Evropsku uniju?
Marija, u istraživanju analiza trendova u maju 2016. godine Aktiv je pitao građane na severu da li podržavaju ulazak Kosova u Evropsku uniju. Evo šta kažu. Svaki drugi, odnosno 57,3% ispitanika ne podržava ulazak Kosova u Evropsku uniju, a podržava 14,4%, s tim da samo 3,3% anketiranih je odgovorilo da apsolutno podržava. Na pitanje kako bi eventualni ulazak u Evropsku uniju promenio postojeće stanje na Kosovu, najviše 41,7% ispitanika smatra da to ne bi uticalo, 36,3% da bi pogoršalo, a 22% da bi poboljšalo. To su kolege iz Aktiva pitali vas, a da li vi imate neko pitanje za naše goste? Evo, izvoli.
Hvala. Dobroveče. Ja sam Jovana Jakovljević iz Instituta za teritorijalni i ekonomski razvoj. Imam pitanje za američkog ambasadora. Gospodine Delavi, koliko vi smatrate da je moguće uticati na javne politike radeći ovdje na severu Kosova, imajući u vidu da se najvažnije odluke koje se tiču upravo problemima na severu Kosova donose na relaciji Beograd-Priština? Hvala.
I think citizens, non-governmental organizations have a very important role to play in helping Kosovo make progress. There are a lot of non-governmental organizations that bridge the Ibar River and bridge the different Kosovo communities. They've got a very important role to play. Obviously, Brussels and the European Union are very important to Kosovo's future, but I would say the important point of impact for citizens of Kosovo, whether in the north or anywhere else in Kosovo, is more Pristina than Brussels. So I think the way you influence Kosovo's future with Brussels and Europe is via working with your elected representatives, with non-governmental organizations in Kosovo, and influence the government of Pristina, which will have an impact on Kosovo's future in Europe and in Brussels.
I mean, I'd put two things on top of this. First, understand your power. I mean, it might feel that everyone is talking about you and not to you. And there is a lot of that happens. But equally, you know, Federica Mogherini came to Mitrovica. You know, I live in a reasonably nice town in England. I grew up in quite a pretty place. She's never come to my town. You know, she's never gone other places. You know, it's not a good sign that the foreign policy chief is coming, but it means that someone's listening to you and someone wants to hear what you're saying. So that gives you power. People are interested in Mitrovica in a way that they're not interested in Prizren or Roševac or Peja, you know, wherever. So that gives you power. The second thing is demand things. And this is a really uncomfortable thing to say to citizens. Your politicians will do what they think helps them. That's what politics is. Sometimes that's good, sometimes that's bad. You can make it that they'd listen to you with your votes and with your voices. Now, I understand that that's hard, and I understand it can be dangerous at times. You know, I'm not being naive about this. But the only way of change is making your political leaders fear you as citizens, that if they don't do what you want, their careers will be over. And it's a really, really hard thing to do, and it's a really, really hard thing for one person to do. It's why civil society is so important, because you can support each other and you can protect each other. Do I think that the people of Mitrovica should be consulted as part of these dialogue processes? And not just the Brussels one, absolutely. I look at the wall, and I look at the train, and I look at the bridge, and I look at everything else, and I think, how many times were people in Mitrovica asked if they wanted these things? I suspect the answer is 0, if I'm honest. So, but the only people that will change that, we will try. You ask about our influence, we try all the time to push these things. But speaking honestly, the only people who ever bring about change are citizens. So good luck, and we've got your back, but we know that change will come from citizens. That's how it works.
Hvala puno na odgovoru. Imamo vremena za bukvalno još 2 kratka pitanja. Izvolite.
Dobro večer, ja sam Veroljub Petronić, nevladina organizacija Humani centar Mitrovica. Pitanje za gospodina ambasadora, za gospodina Delavija.
Nevladin sektor je u pitanju i pitanje je za vas, gospodine Delavi.
Koji su konkretni potezi Sjedinjenih Američkih Država i KFOR-a koje će preuzeti ukoliko se mandat kosovskih bezbednosnih snaga izmeni kroz zakon, a ne kroz ustav?
I have to get back to, I think, my first answer about not answering hypothetical questions. Right now, that's a hypothetical question. We have made our position very clear. The United States, along with Great Britain and other key NATO allies, have been the greatest supporters of the Kosovo security forces since Kosovo's independence 9 years ago. We're very proud of the assistance we've been able to provide, and we're very, very proud of the people who work for the Kosovo security forces and that they've done such a terrific job of developing a security structure from basically nothing at the beginning. Our desire is that this transformation happen according to the Kosovo Constitution, to make sure that it takes into account the sensitivities of all the communities of Kosovo.
I'm going to tell you a personal story. It might not seem relevant at first. So my family is Irish. I grew up in England, but all of my family is Irish. In the Second World War, one of my grandmother's brothers was an Irish policeman, and one was a British soldier. And the British soldier came to visit Ireland during the war to see his brothers and his family. And when his brother, the police officer, met him at the boat, he saw him and pushed him straight back onto the boat. Said, "You idiot, you're wearing a British uniform. If you step into this country, I have to arrest you." Ireland was neutral, Britain was fighting. Communities kind of flow across borders. I look at the Kosovo Security Force and its antecedents, and I understand that it's always going to have a slightly difficult relationship with the Kosovo Serb community, and we just accept that. But I also see that there are now a number of Serbs from Kosovo who are serving in the Kosovo Security Force, both other ranks and now officers. I think they have got a vitally important role to help bring that force closer to the Serbian community. I think the force also needs to do things like building bridges and conducting operations which will help local communities. We worked with the Kosovo Protection Corps in the past when we were building houses for attorneys in Vitina, where the Kosovo Protection Corps, at first, of course, the Serbs wouldn't talk to them, but then they helped come clear roads, build foundations, build houses, and that built trust. This is a long process, but it needs to keep on going. So I think actually we can learn, and Britain and Ireland have had lots of very difficult conflicts. You know, we can accept that those conflicts exist, we can accept that the history exists, but we can choose to build different relationships. Now, I think it's going to be hard, but like Greg said, we've always been supporters. I look at the KSF, and I think for 7 years, it's actually been a pretty solid voice of stability. If I think about who was making the case for the special court, a lot of them were senior KSF officers going into places like Skenderaj or Srbica and saying, listen, this is something we have to do. So, you know, it's a difficult conversation, but I think it could be positive.
Hvala vam puno na odgovoru. Da li imamo još pitanja za goste? Vrlo kratko, samo molim vas i vas za kraće odgovore. Izvolite.
Dobro večer. Jedno pitanje za gospodina Delavija. Jednom prilikom ste izjavili da se politika Amerike prema kvazi Kosovu neće menjati bez obzira ko je predsjednik. I zanima me, da, i da se vojska neće povlačiti sve dok Kosovo ne bude imalo svoju vojsku. Pa me zanima i da bude spremno da bi bilo spremno da se brani. Pošto ne vidim da je Kosovo ikako ugroženo, pogotovo ne od Srbije, čija je politika da im sve što traže, zašto je potrebno da se stvori vojska Kosova? Da li zbog stvaranja velike Albanije ili nečeg drugog? Hvala.
Kosovo is an independent state, and we accept certainly the right of an independent state to have an army if it wants. It's a question of sovereignty. So the question of Greater Albania, I think the borders in the Balkans have changed enough in the last couple of decades, and I'm very satisfied with where the borders are today. We support Kosovo and its current borders, the borders it's had since independence, the borders that are on the Kosovo flag, and we continue to support Kosovo as a sovereign, independent state. We're working, as Ambassador O'Konel said, to help complete Europe whole, free, and at peace, in the words of Churchill, and we believe that the Balkans, in particular, and Europe in general, will be better off as long as Kosovo is a sovereign independent state at peace with its neighbors.
Hvala vam puno na ovim odgovorima, hvala ovim mladim ljudima što su imali pitanje. I za kraj jedno pitanje za vas, gospodine Delavi. Iako je prošle godine najavljena vizna liberalizacija za Kosovo, do ovog momenta čini mi se da ništa nije urađeno. Kosovo, to jest Skupština, nije u stanju da ispuni jedan od osnovnih uslova, to je demarkacija granice sa Crnom Gorom. Znamo šta se dešavalo, da je bilo protesta, bilo suzavca i vi ste bili u Skupštini kada su se svi ti neredi dešavali. Da li smo bliži vanrednim izborima ili možda putovanju građana Kosova bez viza?
That's a lot of questions at once. Wow. I do have to say that until I came to Kosovo, I'd never personally experienced tear gas. So now that I feel that my life as a diplomat is complete, I was jealous of many of my colleagues who were Foreign Service officers who had been involved in demonstrations and were tear gassed over the years. That had not happened to me, but now I'm here. So certainly, I believe that the Kosovo Assembly should pass the border demarcation agreement with Montenegro. The line that the government commission drew was the same line that's existed between Kosovo and Montenegro since 1974, when the two were provinces or autonomous regions of former Yugoslavia. And unfortunately, there's been a lot of time wasted in the Assembly over the last year and a half over this issue. And I'd love to see the Assembly work harder for the benefit of Kosovo. Ambassador O'Konel pointed out the number of laws that actually have to be passed as part of Kosovo's movement towards Europe with the SAA. The Assembly could certainly work harder on those if it had spent less time convulsed with tear gas and political violence. I think when High Rep Mogherini was here just the other day, on Saturday. She made it very clear what Kosovo has to do to get to the stage of visa liberalization that you mentioned. And the key thing that she mentioned was it has to pass the border agreement.
Da li očekujete da će Kosovo to ispoštovati, odnosno da će Skupština Kosova uspeti da usvoji zakon o demarkaciji?
My crystal ball is kind of hazy today, but I will certainly say I hope the Assembly will adopt this. It's in the interest of Kosovo, it's in the interest of Montenegro, and it's certainly in the interest of Kosovo's better relations within the Balkan region.
Gospodo, hvala vam na večerašnjem gostovanju, što ste bili gosti emisije Sporazum i što ste ovim mladim ljudima podelili sa njima svoje mišljenje o pitanjima koje njih i tekako zanimaju, kao i ostale građane Kosova. Gledali ste još jedan sporazum. Vidimo se za 2 nedelje u ovo isto vreme. Pratite nas na društvenim mrežama i pišite šta bi koga voleli da pitamo u vaše ime. Cilj je da se sporazumemo, zar ne? Prijatno večer.